Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today we're discussing deepfakes and the legal questions around them. Deepfake technology can be used to create convincing video and voice recordings, as well as images of people that are fully fabricated yet highly lifelike. Deepfakes have become increasingly easy to create, so easy that even kids and teenagers can use apps to create them. The concern around deepfakes is that they can be used to maliciously spread false information. For example, by creating false sexually explicit images of people or fabricated videos of someone saying something awful that they never did. Deepfakes have victimized celebrities, politicians, and regular school children, and their use is rising. They're becoming easier to create. What are the legal implications of deepfakes? Are our laws keeping pace with technology? What can people do to protect themselves? Here today to discuss this are two experts. Philippe Pasquier is a professor at Simon Fraser University, and Laura Karayan is with the Institute of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Carleton University. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Laura, I'll start with you. I want to ask you if there's anything you would add to my description of deepfakes, and maybe in particular, is it defined in any way in Canadian law?
Yeah, no, your definition was great. I was really glad to see that you acknowledge that, of course, it covers video, images, and audio. They are large language-based models. They're AI. They are AI informed. So, unfortunately, there is no definition in law currently. They are using the definition that's coming out of scholarly research at this point.
So, Philippe, if there's no definition in the law, are there any laws at all that address the creation, distribution, or use of deepfakes in Canada?
Well, not to my knowledge, but unlike Lara, I am not expert in law myself. I'm a computer scientist and a researcher with expertise in how the systems work. I would say, however, that if there were laws, they would be obviously quite limited unless there is a serious international framework, given how distributed and worldwide servers and the use of AIs is at the moment.
So, Philippe, given your expertise is in the technology itself, maybe you can explain to our viewers how easy it actually has become more in the recent years to create these deepfake images.
Well, very easy, and that is really what gives the problem its proportion at the moment. Fake media is nothing new. What's new is that it used to take a lot of skills to make believable fake content, and now it does not. Now, anyone anywhere can go about generating those audio, video fakes as well as text. I have to say, and so this is really the type of synthetic content that we see emerging at scale that is causing.
Laura, I think one of the biggest concerns that's been raised recently with the use of deepfake technology is its use to create sexually explicit images. Indeed, there have been cases where it's been used in schools by teenage boys to create images of their classmates, of teenage girls who are minors. So, I mean, there's a lot of legal issues there, but at a high level, what are some of the concerns about that?
Sure. So actually, I'm just going to go back for briefly just in terms of your legal question. So we don't actually have any formal laws right now, but there are a couple of different areas that it's been speculated that deepfakes might fit into in terms of the Canadian legal framework, and so criminal laws and civil laws. And so in particular with youth, obviously these sorts of deepfakes bring up the specter of child pornography, but we would be really reticent, I think, in Canada to use child pornography laws against young people. Although the practice might not be something that people are very comfortable with, young people might not really appreciate having this practice, occur. We've seen this already with sexting, teenage sexting, right? We already know how embedded technology is in young people's day-to-day lives, but also in their sexualities. Because young people, I'm also a criminologist and a sexuality studies scholar. I've intervened on a lot of sexting cases involving young people. Mm-hmm. And young people do use technology to engage in sort of sexual behavior. And in Canada, we've been reticent to apply Canada's child pornography laws to that. Yeah.
Let's we've got to take a break, but I want to get deeper into some of these questions about criminal liability and perhaps where that liability should lie, if not with youth. We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing deep fakes and the law. Now, Laura, in the last segment, we were talking about these concerning cases where deep fake technology has been used to create false sexually explicit images, including images of minor girls, and often these images are created by underage boys, by minor boys in their class. And I do share your concerns that you raised about criminalizing teenage boys, even though their conduct is, I think, worthy of condemnation. I think that there's a lot of complexity in these cases, and I think that there's responsibility that also lies with the companies that are creating this technology. So where does liability lie? Does this engage criminal code prohibitions that would apply to the AI companies that are allowing the creation of these awful images?
So if you're asking me that, I don't know if Philip wants to weigh in on that. This is one of the tricky questions. And of course, we have our Canada's new online harms bill that is trying to put more of the onus on the companies to have that responsibility. But we do tend to sort of think about deepfakes and AI-based technologies sometimes as inherently bad. And it's not necessarily the technology or even the corporations that are creating them. It's that we need to think about how we're using them. So what we want to do is spend time teaching the young people, just like we did with sexting, about how we respect one another's bodies and how we respect one another's autonomy, and think about that rather than necessarily putting the onus on legislators or the corporations or the companies that build the technology.
No, I absolutely agree with you that there's, of course, non-malicious uses for this technology, and it's an emerging technology that has a sort of unexplored potential uses for the future. But I mean, I understand the concern about these explicit images and the impact that it could have on teenage girls in particular. And Philippe, maybe you can talk to me about whether there's a possibility of building some type of protection into the technology itself to ensure that it isn't abused. Are there any solutions there that could be explored?
Yes. Well, when it comes to commercial product, given the very large user base and the means they have, they're spending considerable efforts and resources in trying to ban illegitimate uses, from banning keywords in request, in text-to-image generation, and to do what we call RLHF, which is reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is the idea of having actual humans, paid human workers, typically in emerging countries where labor is cheap, to filter the system's output and ban child pornography and all sorts of illegitimate content or unwanted content. And in fact, there's lawsuits by those workers who united because they now have PTSD and they've been exposed to terrible content for months and months at a time, trying to train the system not to generate that. But this is just because those big companies have an interest, of course, to become good actors and to help, and to make sure that the lawyers don't ban their systems, and so they try their best. But the truth is that there is well-known jailbreaking techniques, as we call them, to go around those limitations, even for the most sophisticated systems. And to complicate things, there's also a lot of what we call open source systems that are, not taken care of by any known companies or registered entities. And besides that, for people who are savvy in coding, then you can develop your own systems, in which case, you can develop systems explicitly to go around and against those protections. So eventually, as one becomes increasing tech savvy, there's nothing that can really stop you from generating those content. There might be people who stop you to post that content, but every consequence will typically go after the fact. And if your servers are in Thailand, I think there's very little thing that Canadian law enforcement can do at the moment.
Philippe, we've got about a minute left, but I think maybe one of my other questions is, could there be a technological solution in helping the public identify what deep fakes, like, so that we know what to believe? We have only got about a minute.
Yeah, the simple answer is no. There's no, at the moment, reliable way, technological or otherwise, to systematically tell synthetic media from human-made content apart, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate content. So my advice is to not trust any content unless you trust the source, and even then, be careful, because the real problem is not going to be the deepfake we know and have talked about in the media. The real problem is going to be personalized message, imitating your voice and calling your relatives to ask them for money.
Right, absolutely. Good advice. We've got to go now to commercial break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing deepfakes and the law. And, in the last two segments, we were talking about sort of the malicious uses of AI-generated deepfake imagery and video and audio. But of course, there's all kinds of non-malicious potential in this technology. People use it to engage in different types of artistic expression. And my question, Laura, is when that happens, sort of who owns the intellectual property of that image or video? For example, I've seen a video of a person who makes deep fakes where he turns himself into Tom Cruise in particular. He shows himself doing it, shows himself turning into Tom Cruise. So my question is sort of who controls the right to that content? Is it the influencer making this video? Is it the AI company? Do they have a claim? Does Tom Cruise have any claim to this? I think my question is, who has the intellectual property?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that's still, being figured out. But based on the law that we have right now, if you are a celebrity or somebody that has a right to your persona or your images, there are copyright usually in those images. And if those images are used to train the module and to create the new deep fake, there might be copyright infringements. But there's also questions about the new product that's being created with a deep fake and whether or not that's original enough to constitute a new original product, and whether or not there might be rights for some individual to sort of own that. And also, when you're not a celebrity, you don't often own your own image, but there might be other sort of privacy or other tort laws that would help you to sort of make claims around your image, like defamation or that sort of thing. So in terms of copyright, it's getting figured out at the moment, but there is some debate about whether or not the new images created by deepfakes might themselves have some sort of copyright value, or at least some original artistic value. Yeah.
Philippe, is there anything you want to add to that, in particular on, we focused a lot on malicious use, and I do have a lot of concerns about the potential malicious use of deepfake technology, but can you maybe expand on some other examples where this is a artistic expression? I think there's also a famous or sort of infamous case of an AI-generated Drake song that went viral that was a lot of people really liked, but what are some non-malicious uses, and then what are some of the issues that you see there as well?
Yes. There's a lot of in the creative domain, because those generative AI systems are able to do that. A lot of use there, and the copyright status of synthetic media is a complicated affair. And to my knowledge, as Laura was saying, it's ongoing, and everyone is sort of waiting to know what the lawyers are going to do. But you have the data used to train the system. So in that case, music by Drake maybe, often scrapped from the internet, sometimes freely available on the internet. And so therefore, if it's not under a paywall or anything like that, maybe I have the right to use that data. And in fact, OpenAI and a lot of big companies are under class action suits right now by all the artists, who wrote all the books that ChatGPT read, who made all the images and artworks that DALL-E and Midjourney have been trained on. They're not very happy, and so they want a share that, or even the right to be forgotten, which is really, really hard to act, in fact. And in fact, none of those big models, an AI model, would exist without that scrapping of the data. So that's the data big problem there. The code used to train, and the license that comes with that code is another complex area, because in fact what we generate with that code might not be yours. It might be NVIDIA's property, the train model itself, which does not contain the data. In academia, we do that all the time. We train a model with data scrapped from the internet, we get them under fair dealing, then we can sell them to a company because our model doesn't have the data. And then the generated artifact.
Philippe,
you know,
Philippe, you mentioned the right to be forgotten. Maybe you could explain to our listeners what the right to be forgotten is on the internet. And one of the concerns is with these AI generated or deepfake images or videos, once it's on the internet, it's there forever, even if you didn't make it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. The network distributed dimension of the internet makes it virtually impossible to truly erase something definitively. But the right to be forgotten is this idea that some companies and in some legislation, there is laws permitting someone to ask a company to get rid of all the data that concerns themselves. Let's say you created a Facebook account. Of course, they've been mining all of the data on your account. At some stage, you want to say, yeah, I want to kill that account, but I want also that you erase all the data in the database, not just my profile would be out, but also that you don't sell no more the data that I've been giving you for the years.
Right. We've got to go to commercial break now, but we will continue this conversation when we come back. Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing deep fakes and the law. Now, Laura, in the last segments, we were talking about sort of the legislative gap in Canada and how there isn't really much legislation dealing specifically with deepfakes, although some parts of deepfake technology might fall under different pieces of legislation. How does that compare to other countries? Do other countries have legislation specifically related to deepfakes? And if they do, how does that sort of fit into an international framework? Because I know when it comes to things on the internet, I mean, this is international stuff we're talking about. Something on the internet isn't on the internet just in Canada or just in the United States. It's on the internet really everywhere.
Yeah. So, there's just so much I would love to say about that. The thing about the international frameworks is, we have seen deepfakes, particularly new deepfakes, being criminalized in terms of the production and the distribution in other jurisdictions. So the UK, for example, has criminalized both the production and the distribution of deepfake porn. Now, I will say also that, kind of going back to the previous question, there is, there are reasons to think of deepfake pornography as also cultural production. We tend to sort of think of artistic production as just as distinct from sexual production, but there's lots of ways in which we can also acknowledge that artistic production has always been sexual, and sexuality has always been, has been represented artistically. And so there are protections internationally for sexual representations. And so we, even though there have been criminalization in other jurisdictions like the UK, other jurisdictions are grappling more with the question of freedom of expression, artistic expression, and those sorts of areas. So we haven't seen any federal criminal legislation in Canada or the United States, although the United States is pushing a lot harder. Canada, even with its new proposed online harm bill, is taking probably a more sort of regulatory approach and leaving the possibility that deepfake porn might be regulated under our existing intimate images provisions of our criminal code. So I personally would not like to see a standalone deepfake porn criminal provision, but that's because I also am like a sexuality studies scholar, like I said, and somebody interested in sexual expression and freedom of expression and the courts and constitutionality. So that's generally where we are internationally.
So one of the things I want to say is, like, the sexually explicit imagery is not the only potential malicious use of deepfakes, of course. I mean, this is the one, as a mom of preteen and teenage kids, it's obviously top of mind for me, and I think it is for a lot of Canadians. But there's also the concern about political interference, including by foreign governments and foreign agents. And I think that's particularly worrying during election periods, that where we've seen foreign governments meddle in various elections. Philippe, is there anything you want to point out about the concern over foreign interference and how foreign governments might be able to use this technology to meddle in our elections?
Yes, well, yes, there's real concern there, and you're right to point out the fact that beside the bullying with deepfake porn, there's all sorts of other illegitimate use. And I want to mention here, there's over 1 million. The nice documentary on DW, the German channel, just revealed there's over 1 million women affected right now by revenge porn using deepfakes. And so it's not just kids; it's also adults, mostly women, in fact. Financial fraud, there's hoax, there's all sort of things. But what we really, and then there's the nice, the known cases of fake news that are political in nature. You remember the Barack Obama demonstration by John Peel as early as 2019. Then the fake calls from Biden more recently, the fake announcement from Zelensky giving up war, etc. But these would typically be caught because of the source they come from, and they can be other sources denying their authenticity. What we're really afraid of is that personalized email campaigns and all those convincing sort of technology are already in place, legitimately used by political parties in our countries, and illegitimately used by foreign actors. And there's not much we can do there. But
That's all the time we have. Philippe, Laura, I want to thank you both so much. We've heard today about the rise in the use of deep fakes generated by AI and the way these fake images and videos can be used to manipulate and harm individuals and the public. Does the law need to change to address this emerging technology, or is this a form of artistic expression? What do you think? You be the judge. I'm Christine, and remember, a freer Canada starts with you.